For more concerning the IMF and World Bank annual meetings, let's now cross live to Washington, D.C., where our correspondent Nkechi Nnanna is standing by at the IMF headquarters. Nkechi, thank you so much for being here tonight. And of course, it's been a long week with all of those predictions, most of them not very pleasant. But as the IMF and World Bank annual meetings come to an end, what would you say are some of the focus points?
Yes, Amaka, and as you said in your introduction, on the top line of what happened this week at the meetings is that reduction of global growth. We know that on Tuesday at the beginning of the meetings, there was a downgrade of global growth projection from 2.9%, which was forecast in July, to 2.7%. And the message is just that it's going to get much worse before it gets better. And also on top of the line, obviously, is the Russia invasion of Ukraine and how it has impacted the entire world. It was flagged as the single most crisis fueling the slowdown in the global economy. And so before the meetings, the IMF approved the $1.3 billion emergency funding for Ukraine. And during a high-level meeting this week on Thursday between Ukrainian officials and IMF officials, the Ukrainian officials were pressing for more non-additional emergency funding. The size of that funding or when it will be is still unclear. And at the end of the meeting, the IMFC told reporters that they couldn't come to a consensus for a communique because of resistance from the Russian delegation. So those are just some of the highlights from the meetings this week.
And of course, Nkechi, the fact that the fund both called for higher interest rates to fight inflation, and at the same time, it's also talking about, risk it has to growth rates. Talk to us about how central banks are interpreting this mixed message.
Well, before I tell you how they should interpret it, I'll tell you what the IMF chief Kristalina Georgieva says about that. She says inflation is stubborn, but central bankers and central banks across the world need to be more stubborn in fighting that inflation. And so, like you said, yes, monetary policy should work together with fiscal policy in order to fight this inflation. However, the World Bank Group President David Marper says if tightening monetary policy too fast and doing it in a synchronized manner across all countries, it might lead us into a prolonged recession. So the key issue here is to have monetary policy, trying to stabilize price, and then you have fiscal policy on the other hand, just trying to alleviate pressures that the world is facing.
Nkechi, before I let you go, we have to talk about, emerging economies such as Nigeria. What are the key takeaways for countries like ours, really?
Yes, a lot have been said about emerging economies, sub-Saharan Africa at these meetings, the impacts, what they should do. And one of it is to be prudent in macroeconomic policies, really just stack up on your fundamentals, build your fundamentals, access to education, healthcare, for example. During COVID, countries that had those fundamentals were able to deal with that shock much better than others. Also use the supports that these multilateral banks, the IMF, have put in place. And even beyond that, Amaka, more importantly, Africa just needs to recognize that we can help ourselves. Africa can help itself. It can open up and reach out more, and that's something that our minister, Nigeria's finance minister Zainab Ahmed, was talking about, taking advantage of Africa integration, taking advantage of some policies within Africa. And also earlier today, there was a briefing focusing on the state of the region of our region, Africa, and basically just dialoguing about the opportunities we have in turbulence. And so something that African countries can take away from this is, one, we have the resources, we can help ourselves. We don't always have to be the ones reaching out for support, collecting aid, like the Zimbabwean finance minister said. We can be the ones to give out support to the rest of the world. I mean, we're a continent of 1.23 billion people, really bearing the brunt of external shocks. So the African influence really on the global issues should be more prominent, Amaka.
That message quite apt, and for your in-depth analysis and of course for bringing us up to speed. Nkechi, Nnanna, thank you.